Welcome. This week we are going to talk about the importance of folate. A lot of you might be familiar with folic acid and B vitamins. It's something that I get asked quite frequently about, and we are going to dive into how to prevent neural tube defects if we aren't taking a supplement for that specifically, like a prenatal or a multivitamin. And today we are going to start things off with a question that I had from a client specifically around this. So let me pull it up so I can read it for you. She said, "Hi Samantha, I'm wanting to learn more about the things that you teach. Is taking desiccated beef liver, bee pollen, cod liver oil, and copper enough to prevent neural tube defects? How much of each should the general public consume to ensure we are getting enough folate in pregnancy? What if the person is breastfeeding on top of this? I know lab levels of B vitamins are generally advised if going to recommend doses, but most people don't have access to B testing vitamin levels. Thank you so much for all the work that you do." So, and she said, i.e., would you take more than the recommended dose on the bottle for pregnancy and breastfeeding? Okay, so let's break that down into sections. First of all, let's start with what folate is. A lot of people are familiar with folic acid. That is a synthetic form of folate. Folate is the B vitamin that we are looking to get here. And a lot of the whole crux of this, what we're looking for, let me just change my screen a little bit so I can make it easier for that question to be there. And then I can make my notes a little bit easier for me. So when we are getting down to what really, where does neural tube defects come from? What does that really mean? I think that's an important place to start from. So when we're thinking of that, the neural tube defects is what we're trying to lower is called homocysteine. So homocysteine is a protein that can start to appear in the blood, and when that rises, then we can start to see that birth defects rise as well. So that's at the quick basic level of it, that's what we're trying to do. The thought is that if we take folate, then it lowers homocysteine, and then therefore birth defects are lowered. That's really part of it, though. I have a book here, and so if you're interested in, I'm sure you can find the study, but there's some interesting, I would say, I don't agree with everything that he teaches and that he writes about in the book, but I do think that there's some really interesting points, and we're going to go over them. But this one is the Optimum Nutrition Bible. And so he actually talks about homocysteine and B vitamins and the study that went over them. So this one, and I'm sure I'm going to butcher this person's name, so I apologize in advance, but in 2022, Koyama et al. Did a study where they were looking at B vitamins and homocysteine. So when they gave folic acid, so again, they gave a synthetic form, alone there was a 17% reduction in homocysteine, but then when they paired it with B12 and B6, there was a 59% reduction in homocysteine. So a lot of people think that means that, okay, so we need a prenatal, we need a multivitamin. That's what we really need to aim for. When I think what that is really showing is that we need things that are naturally occurring, because the fear that we aren't getting enough and then taking synthetic things in order to compensate for that doesn't mean that is going to get into the body. And I'll give you an example of that. So it's really common that people think that they aren't able to absorb nutrients properly. That's a really common one with iron, which is just ridiculous, that that we don't absorb iron. That is the issue, that we aren't able to absorb it, and that's why it's not in the blood. Just because it's not in the blood doesn't mean it's not in the body, but I won't get on the iron train right now. So part of the issue with that is they think, well, then let's just go and get an infusion, because the issue is me absorbing it, and if I'm not absorbing it, then I'll just, get a bolus of it shot into me. Just logically speaking through that for a second, if your body is not absorbing something, why would you then lean towards something that is not naturally occurring and then shoot it into you. We're going to inject this bolus of something that you're saying that your body is having a hard time absorbing, and that's going to be the solution. Because if you can't get your body to absorb it through the gut, then we should just pick a different route that the body isn't used to and get it to have the markers that we want, because that's the true indicator of robust health. That sounds ridiculous. And it makes absolutely no sense to me, especially when you start going down the trail of looking at how iron moves, and you start looking at where it gets stored in the body. There are different women who will come to me who have had, I would say, like 6+ iron infusions, and they're trying to get their body back to normal, and the body has to detoxify. It does. It's a heavy metal, and it gets into the tissues, and that can be an issue. So rather than looking at homocysteine as specifically a folate issue, we need to be looking at it as a copper and I would say, like an overall nutrient dense issue. Because when we look at that study, for example, the more different nutrients that they had, the better results came from it. And so again, it's not that we need a multivitamin, it's not that we need a prenatal, because they're synthetic. And there's a few different things that I mean by that. If you want, comment below, and I'm sure I could do a video on breaking down different prenatals or multivitamins. So if you add which one you want me to look at, and I can explain to you why they're synthetic, I think that would be a really great place to start. But let's get back to the question. So folate, why we need folate during pregnancy, why that's really important, that's where it's coming from, is from lowering homocysteine. That's what we are after. And so is taking desiccated beef liver, bee pollen, cod liver oil, and copper enough to prevent neural tube defects? So this question is really specific to the person, and I think part of the issue and the narrative is that there are optimal amounts that we need to consume, and that's why there's dietary amounts that you look when you're looking at your supplement label. That's why there's these different recommendations. People will say aim to get so much of a certain nutrient in throughout the day, and that's what we need to optimally get. I really think that those are just a lot of BS. Part of the issue is because that assumes that we are all starting at the same level, and none of us are. I haven't had one client who I was like, yes, you and somebody else, that's the exact same level that you're starting from. Everybody has different parts to consider, because we're all starting at a different level of balance or imbalance, depending on how you want to look at it. And I think a really great way is if you think of it like a staircase. If you think that we are trying to get to the top, we want to reach optimal health, not perfect health, because you will never get to perfect health. You will never get to a point where your body is not communicating with you. That is not what we want at all. We want optimal health. And optimal health means that when we have symptoms, we know what they mean, that we know that we have a network of people who can also support us, because we weren't designed to do things alone. We were designed to do things with support. That's a natural part of us. And I think if 2020 taught us anything, that we need people around us to help support us. We aren't built to do things in isolation. So know what the body's communicating, have a network that we know that we can lean into if we need additional support, and that we allow the body to speak to us. That is so huge, because a lot of the time we think, well, okay, I'll give you an example. I had one lady who messaged me, I think it was on TikTok. She said, I bought the supplements that you recommended. Everything worked great. I had the best results that I've ever seen, but I'm still having really heavy periods, and I think surgery is the only solution. Why? The heavy periods are good. That's good. You've been lied to. You have been lied to that your heavy periods are bad. They are a good thing, because we have consumed too much iron and the body needs to regulate itself. So going and just removing the way that the body is communicating with us and the way that the body is detoxing is not part of the solution. If somebody was frequently having diarrhea, would you remove their rectum? Would you just be like, no, we're getting rid of that. There's too much runny stool. Let's just get rid of it. You wouldn't do that. So why are we removing the womb? I don't understand. That makes no sense. So part of the healing journey is being able to understand what the body is communicating, and that's really important. Because we've been lied to. The way that our bodies work as women has not been the narrative. And I think back to when I first was put on birth control. I would have been 13 years old, 12 or 13. And I remember the doctor saying, this particular birth control was great because I was not going to have a period. And it was going to come, I think, once every 3 or 4 months. Regardless, it doesn't matter. I never had a period while I took it. But he said that it was a good thing because I was going to keep my eggs. And that's really what we wanted to do, is we wanted to keep our eggs. That's not how our bodies are designed. Women's bodies are not designed to not shed. That's why we live longer than men, is because we shed every month. And that's just ridiculous. And also the narrative that women go through menopause because they have such a low amount of eggs. I think I would probably buy into that a little bit more if the majority of women weren't taking birth control throughout their lives. It doesn't make any sense. The amount of women that are taking birth control, now we have women that think that they're going into perimenopause in their 30s. Anyways, getting off course on the folate. But, so, staircase. We are thinking of a staircase where think of it as if we're all standing on different tiers of the staircase, okay? And so we want to get to the top tier of the staircase for optimal health. And part of it is, too, that when stressors happen in our lives, we can come down a step or two. We can realize that, maybe there's different things that we are really consistent with. Maybe sometimes we're really consistent with our supplements. Maybe something less ideal happens to us and we want to go out and we want to go and have, fast food for a little while. Maybe we just aren't sleeping very well at night and we come down a couple steps. Part of it is that we learn how to not stay down. We know how to quickly get back up. We know what to do to get us back to that point. And so when we're thinking of that in terms of how much supplements to take, so the recommended daily amount, I have a big issue with the recommended daily amount because it was made to determine somebody who already has optimal health, what they would need in order to maintain that. We aren't talking about making up for deficiencies. We aren't looking at, pregnancy or postpartum. None of that is taken into consideration. It's just the general healthy person looking to maintain health. And so with that, I can't tell you to take more than the recommended amount, and I don't tell my clients to take more than the recommended amount, but I do tell them to listen to their bodies and start low and go slow and see where that lands them. And you'll find that when you do that, you actually land at a higher amount than recommended. So for example, I'll use my own adrenal cocktail. So the supplement that I've made or the company that I have is Drink Neat, and the one supplement that's available right now is Salty Fashioned. And that, B vitamins are important. That's what we're talking about in this video. So that includes a different variety of B vitamins, which I think is part of the missing link when we're talking about adrenal cocktails. But it's an electrolyte adrenal cocktail. Just depends on basically where you want to fall on the spectrum of things. Part of the thing, though, with it is that the recommended amount is substantially lower than if you were in the United States and you were to see the recommended amount on something. And part of that is because when we're looking at Health Canada's regulations, they differ than what the United States has. So one, I wanted it to be lower because I find that a lot of people are starting a lot lower on that staircase and they want to take the recommended amount, what's on the jar, and that's not serving them best. They'll start to have a lot of histamine reactions because it starts to regulate think of it kind of, again, like a detoxification. That's really what it is. Your body starts moving things around that it's had in storage, and all of a sudden, it's too much too fast. Think, for example, if I was talking to somebody who had a sedentary lifestyle, and I said to them, you know what, walking, really great for you. You should start walking every single day. But when you're walking, aim to get 10,000 steps in. So this person goes from sitting They do maybe 100 steps a day. And then I say, make sure you get in your steps. So then the next day they go and they do 10,000 steps. I can guarantee that that person would be calling me after they did that walk and they would be like, Samantha, I am allergic to walking. I can't do it because it's too much, too fast. And that can be the same thing when we're talking about supplements. So the amount to take is completely person specific, and I don't think that there is like this amount that we need to necessarily hit, because some people will find that they do better with a lot more. Again, I'll give you 2 more examples on why that's significant. Part of it is too, so it's estimated that in the 1930s, I believe, 1930s or 1940s, that we used to get between 4 to 6 milligrams of copper per day. And now it's estimated that we get 9/10 of 1 milligram. Okay, so we have lost anywhere from essentially, basically 4 to 5 milligrams of copper in our foods. And that has to do with our farming practices a lot. A huge part of it. A lot of it has to do with the fact that even the things that were rich in copper, like spinach, for example, has now been modified so that it has a preference for iron. There's things like that that are going on. So when we think of that, if we think, 1930s, and then over time we have lost the majority of copper, think of the different generations that has gone through, where we have lost the amount of copper that we've had. And the significance of that is that, again, think of it like if you're starting to go for a walk, you have to go really low and really slow to start adding things in that your body needs. But you also need to do it in a way where you recognize that there's some ground that you're probably going to have to make up. So one of my clients, she was born at 34 weeks, 32 or 34. I'm thinking it was 34 weeks. The significance of that is the last 6 weeks of pregnancy, baby gets a bolus of copper, and ideally they're born with 10 milligrams of copper in their liver, more than an adult would have. The reason I say that is very important is because it's important for you, not only if you're a mom, to think about where your baby is born in terms of, how long they're born for. I'm inclined to think that if a baby comes very quick, like either, not at the 40-week mark time frame, within that, I would say within that week, that baby had an exposure to iron, and the body is smart and wisdomous and uses it as a way to get baby out, so baby can get out of the iron-rich environment and into the world, because the placenta runs on copper. It's meant to be a copper-rich state, and if we're not meeting that threshold, then the body and the baby are really smart. That is that's my kind of logic that I would say as to how to explain it, because from the clients that I've worked with, you can definitely see a connection when they talk about how early they were born. I've had one client who was born early after her mom was robbed at a convenience store. High stress. Iron and stress go hand in hand together. And I think that things start out as emotions and then they build into symptoms from there. Anyways, getting back to the role that, the nutrients that we should get. So if we are born really early, then we miss out on that copper download. And so this one client, she was born early. She would have missed out on that copper download. She has type 1 diabetes. And she had reduced, after working together, she had reduced her insulin medication by half by, the different supplements that we talk about, but also by adding in copper. And that is like unheard of. That's not something that I would say is like a super common thing. That's wild and amazing. But she did it by listening to her body. And she would take about, I would say, if memory serves me correct, I think it was around 10 milligrams of copper that she was taking a day, along with other things, not just copper itself, because copper itself doesn't mean that it's bioavailable copper. That could be another video, but so that's important to point out, that for her, 10 milligrams of copper is working. For me, I think that would be too much. So the amount to take, very specific to the person. It's best to start at less than the recommended amount and then see where you fall. When I do blood donations, I find that I get rashes on my body. Primarily, I get one on my right chest, and I get one on my left eyelid. The eyes and the liver are connected. It makes sense. The EPO hormone that the body is releasing through the adrenal glands is signaling the body to make more red blood cells and release more iron. Iron is one of the first places that it gets stored is in the liver and in the bile ducts. So, of course, my liver is going to be detoxing. Again, it's not about not having any symptoms at all. It's about understanding what the body's communicating. And so I find that if I take extra cod liver oil, especially during those times, that those rashes disappear and that my body is needing more vitamin A. So, for example, rather than 1 teaspoon, I actually take 2 tablespoons of cod liver oil when I'm going through those phases. And I find that that's what my body needs. So, back to the question, is taking desiccated beef liver, bee pollen, cod liver oil, and copper enough to prevent neural tube defects? I don't think that is a question that I can answer. I think that it depends on the person. I think that that's a really great start. I would obviously add in adrenal cocktails to that, specifically the one that I formulated, because I formulated it for a reason. Without a whole bunch of chemicals added to it, it's going to have an earthy flavor because it's not going to have the different things that are added to it to make it taste, synthetic. It has the B vitamins, it has reishi, it has shiitake. Shiitake is huge when we are talking about wanting to help the body during pregnancy. If you look up reishi babies it's like a calm baby that typically come from them when moms take reishi while they're pregnant. But shiitake is really huge because of the different B vitamins that it has, and it also has choline in it. And I wanted to have like a natural way to add choline into a supplement that wasn't from an animal-based product. So anyways, I would say that I would definitely look at adding like a it's not working, there we go. An adrenal cocktail to that. I would look at a vitamin E. So vitamin E is an 8-part or 9-part complex. I think New Roots is the one that has a good one where it's an 8-part complex that you can get. So I would say that would be good. I think that lineup there, in my mind, would be much better than if you were taking like a prenatal, because prenatals are synthetic, and that doesn't mean that your minerals and everything like that is going to be activated. And a copper supplement on its own, there's different forms of copper. I'm not familiar with all of them. I'm very particular over the ones that I'm recommending. So if you want to see the supplements that I recommend, then download my free ebook. I'll link it down below, because quality matters and not all of them are made the same. So how much of each should the general public consume to ensure we are getting enough folate in pregnancy? Again, it totally depends on the person. And I think part of the misconception is that, one, don't get me wrong, I do think that studies and research have a place, but I think that a lot of the time they've taken priority over us listening to our bodies, and that's part of the issue. So for example, if you walk into a room, and have you ever had that feeling like say you're already in a room, have you ever had that feeling that somebody else has entered that room, you haven't heard them, but you just get that feeling like they're there? You don't need a study to tell you that you've had that feeling and that you can listen to your body. And I think that's part of the issue, is that we've gone so far away in terms of women's wellness, where we are, constantly told that we need like some research study to tell us what we need. And that's going to also come back to the dietary recommended amounts, where that's going to, I would hope anyway, it might not even be based on some kind of concrete finding, but still it puts us into this box, and like this box is telling us that this is what we need, when really, again, think of that staircase, we're all at different steps. And while, for example, I might be having anxiety, somebody else might be having constipation, and somebody else might be having rashes. And while there's different things in each one that we can find that are similar, they're likely going to be indicators of different minerals, different nutrients, maybe a step of detoxification that our body is going through. And I think that that's really, really important. I cannot stress that enough. So, I mean, if the next question is what if the person is breastfeeding on top of that? If the person is breastfeeding, then they need a lot of vitamin A in the form of retinol. So vitamin A in the form of retinol, for anybody that doesn't know, that's going to come from an animal-based source. That means that a lot of the misconception around beta-carotene to retinol, so if you think of beta-carotene, that's going to be what's in your carrots. If you think of retinol, that's going to be in beef liver, in animal-based products. The difference between the two is the body does convert beta-carotene into retinol. Beta-carotene, though, is the lowest form of vitamin A. And on top of that, the conversions aren't equal. So depending on how well your iron is moving is going to depend on how well this conversion takes place. So typically, it'll take about 11 units of beta-carotene to equal 1 of retinol. And so think of the extra work that your body has to do, especially if it's already deficient. You're going to have to eat a lot of carrots in order to get to that retinol point. And the reason that retinol is important is because when I'm talking about bioavailable copper, retinol binds the copper to the protein that we want it bound to, and that's ceruloplasmin. So that's really, really important. But yeah, I would say vitamin A in the form of retinol can be really depleted while we're breastfeeding, and I would definitely look into that. And her next question was, I know lab levels of B vitamins are generally advised if going to recommend doses, but people don't have access to testing B vitamin levels. And they don't. Because if you look at, a quick Google search will tell you that the richest place of your copper in your body is meant to be in your bone marrow. And also, coincidentally enough, that's also the richest place of B vitamins. Now, what a weird concept. Why would that happen? Like, why would we have copper, richest source in the body, bone marrow? Why would that be a rich source of your B vitamins too if they weren't dependent on each other? So I think that, when we're talking about the MTHFR and having methylated B vitamins, I think that that's just bogus, because you're just trading. You're basically been told, don't take these synthetic B vitamins, take this synthetic one instead. It's still synthetic. It doesn't matter which way you slice it. Just because there's an active and an inactive form, which there are inactive and active forms of B vitamins, but that doesn't mean that it's not synthetic. It's still synthetic because it's not naturally occurring. It doesn't have the natural nutrients needed around it, and that's really important. So I would say that symptoms are the way to go. Listening to our body is really, really important. And that sounds confusing, and that isn't like the nice little box that we want things to fit in, where it's, I think a lot of the time people think, for example, low ferritin means that you need more of this. You need XYZ. A low hemoglobin means you need more XYZ. And it would mean the opposite. So if you had hemochromatosis, then it would mean that you need less of XYZ. And if you had a high ferritin, then it would mean that you would need less of XYZ. Like, we just want things to be that simple, and it's not. Because when we're looking at things in isolation, that's not actually telling us how the overarching picture of the body is going. So while I do think that lab work can be helpful to an extent, I would say that like 80% of the work that I do with my clients is focused around the symptoms, and I would say 20% is focused on either HTMA or blood work, because there is some value to it, but not in isolation. I don't like looking at one blood marker and saying, yep, that's this. It's more of a general picture to see where the stress is in the body, how it's handling that stress. And it's a discussion. A discussion needs to be had to figure out, maybe there's specific B vitamins that we should be looking for. For example, if somebody is, I had one client, She would do keto during the week, and then on the weekends, she would eat whatever she wanted and drink. Well, her body is going to be very depleted in magnesium, and she's also going to need a lot of B3. So, because alcohol is very depleting on B3. And so when we're thinking, well, if we're looking to prepare for pregnancy, there's going to be a little bit of different things that we have done throughout our past. Maybe the way that we came into this world, when we were always talking about copper and whether or not we entered this world with enough copper and different things like that. So for me, I think that it's more beneficial that we listen to our body. So anxiety, I would say, like mental wellness sides of things are really good indicators of how our B vitamins are doing and whether or not we need a different variety of them. I think that starting low and slow with the amounts of them and then slowly increasing is the way to go. I do love bee pollen, but I am a huge, huge fan of mushrooms. I think mushrooms are really underrated and I love them so much. So I would definitely, if you were like, I don't want your adrenal cocktail, Sam, I would still say go and find some mushrooms that align with what you're looking for, because I think that they can be really helpful. Same thing with herbs. So I don't have like a specific cut and dry amount that people need to take, but I do think that that's really important. And she said that she had posted, I want to make sure that I'm getting all of the questions. Let's see. She said that she had posted, I'm just looking in my school community right now, which, if you are interested in, I will also add that down below. I'd like to know more information about folate in pregnancy and how much one should consume if not taking a traditional prenatal or synthetic vitamins. How do you know if they're getting enough to prevent neural tube defects? Yeah, okay, so it's basically the same question. So I would say there is not a set amount. I would say if somebody's looking at the set amount, then yeah. I think that if we are eating whole foods, and like not from the store, but just like an apple, if we are eating, pasture raised meat, things like that. So that's a common question that I get. Like, does it have to be from the Whole Foods store? No, just like Whole Foods. Whole Foods is what I mean. But if we're doing that, we're taking, naturally occurring vitamins, really important. I think there is a huge misconception when we're talking about anybody who's taken vitamin D in the past. I would say that potassium supplementation is probably one of like the best things that I've seen come from a lot of clients when clients are having like a lot of swelling at the end of pregnancy, when they're starting to feel really lightheaded. I find that increasing potassium can be really huge, and so that's part of why I think electrolytes are so beneficial, especially when you pair them with vitamin C, helping the adrenal glands, all that good work. I would say that if we are making sure that, we are allowing our body to detoxify, whether that's regular bowel movements, whether that means regular sweating, that also encompasses like allowing us to feel feelings and release emotions as they come up, I think is huge, not harboring different things. I really do think that a lot of things start off as emotional and then they manifest outwards into something different from there. So I would say all in all, I don't have like a cut and dry, get this certain amount, because I don't necessarily believe in that, because I can tell you without a doubt, if I were to tell my clients, I want you to get to this certain amount, I don't think that that would be helpful for everyone. And I think of that as like the 10,000 steps a day, where it would be nice if we could all get there, but that's not where everybody's starting from. And if I were to say that to the majority of the clients that I work with, and, rightfully so, the clients that I work with are likely going to be ones that are struggling more because they're the ones looking for help. They want help getting there. then I could tell you that they wouldn't end up there. They would end up with likely having histamine reactions, they would end up with headaches, they would end up with brain fog, they would end up with a whole bunch of different things because it would be too much too fast for them. So I think the real key is, depending on how far out you want to become pregnant in is important, whether or not you already are pregnant and you're looking to add these things in. Um, you know, um, I assume the breastfeeding question is in there because that's what's happening. And so that means that we're, depending on how long we've been breastfeeding for, we are looking to make up some nutritional gains, I would say, for sure. And it can be hard when we're breastfeeding, but a woman who's breastfeeding and say breastfeeding their baby one time a day versus a baby who has a newborn and is breastfeeding at, every three hours or so, that's going to have a different nutritional depletion than it would, they're not the same. So that also needs to be taken into consideration. But there's a lot of really nutrient-dense B vitamins out there that come from whole foods that I think are really important that we can incorporate super easily throughout the day. And I do think that that's really, really important. So I would be amiss if I didn't talk about the Drink Neat Adrenal Cocktail. This is it right here. So part of why I formulated it this way is because, adrenal cocktails typically have whole food vitamin C, sodium, and potassium. And I wanted to make sure that this also had rich forms of B vitamins as well, as well as an aptogenic. So it has reishi in it, which can help the adrenal glands, but it has multiple forms of whole food vitamin C. So whereas most of the time it's just acerola cherry, which is fine. Acerola cherry is like the second richest source of whole food vitamin C. I wanted to have something that added different nutrients to it as well, and that's why this one has pine. And in place of the coconut, or in place of, say, cream of tartar, this one has coconut water. So I wanted to, again, make it a little bit more gentler on the body. So this has acerola, pine, reishi, shiitake, sodium, and coconut water to make it a little bit more gentle. With all of that being said, I hope that clears up some of the questions around B vitamins, around folate, and how much to take. But I think it really depends on the person. All right, I hope that helps, and I hope to see you soon.